hit Tab, and it does exactly the same as clicking this button right there with your mouse. So the task view brings up a window for me to be able to switch between my tasks, but that's not what we're here to see. We've already seen this. Let's look down here on the lower right corner. There it is, a new desktop. Let's give it a try. I'll tap my Windows Tab key. I'll click on New Desktop, and it creates a second desktop for me. Let's do one more new desktop. 3 desktops. So if I go to my desktop number 2, you'll see it's blank. How do I switch back to my other desktop? Well, by clicking here on the task view, I can switch back to desktop number 1. By clicking on the task view button, I can switch over to desktop number 2. And while I'm on desktop number 2, I could launch yet another program. Let's say I'd like to launch my calendar. Once I launch the calendar, it is now launched on desktop number 2. A nice clean desktop just for my calendar. We could launch Outlook or Word or Excel on a separate desktop, making it clean and clutter-free. To switch back to the other desktop, I can simply click on the task view and switch back to the desktop number 1. If you stay tuned for our future videos, I'm going to introduce you to a keystroke that allows you to move between these desktops so that we don't have to click on the task view button or to hold down the Windows key and hit Tab. No, there's a hotkey that'll move us between our desktops. We'll get to that in our future videos. But for now, to create a new desktop, I simply click on the task view and click on the New Desktop button. You might be wondering, well, Tom, what if I have an icon or a program running on one desktop and I'd like to move it to another? I'd like to demonstrate that for you right now. I'm going to move the PowerPoint program to desktop number 3. So by switching over to desktop 1 and then clicking on the task view, I can then grab PowerPoint and drag it over. Yes, you guessed it. I'm holding down my left mouse button and I can drop it right there onto desktop number 3. Let's do the same thing with Word to desktop number 4. I'll grab Word and drag it over to desktop number 4. Now, if you're like me, a clutter-free environment is a relaxed environment. Desktop number 1 has Excel open. Desktop number 2, I've got my calendar open. I could have Outlook here. Desktop number 3, I have my PowerPoint program running. And desktop number 4, I have Microsoft Word running. Clutter-free desktops, making it easy for me to work on separate projects and separate programs simultaneously without any confusion, without any mess. Alt, Tab, as we learned in our previous exercise, moves us between our open applications. Windows Tab brings up the task view, which is the same as clicking on the task view button on the lower portion of our screen. Creating new desktops is as easy as clicking on the New Desktop button while we're in the task view window. And then finally, moving programs from one desktop to another is as easy as grabbing the program while in task view and dragging it to another desktop. Well, you know what I'm going to ask you to do now. Pause the video. Go try it yourself. 3 things. Use the task switcher, Windows Tab. Use the new task view button down at the bottom of your screen. Create a desktop and move applications between desktops. And remember, I'm going to show you some keyboard shortcuts that are going to make this far easier for you if you just stay tuned for the next few videos. It's quite common to have multiple windows open on a single desktop, such as Excel and Word running at the same time. We may even have Outlook running, a File Explorer running, and maybe even a few other programs running at the same time, maybe even all on one desktop. Our last video, we showed you how to use multiple desktops to keep things clutter-free and organized. But again, we may have multiple windows open on a single desktop, and I am going to show you how to use the new feature called Windows Snap. Now you might be thinking, Tom, Windows Snap isn't new, but it's been revisited and enhanced to make it even more useful. So what is Windows Snap? Well, very commonly we will take a window, especially if we have a larger monitor, and we'll scooch it over to the right and we'll size it to make room on the other side of the screen for another window so that we can look at two programs simultaneously while we're making comparisons and assessments. So now you can see I've got Word and Excel on two sides of my screen. Very easy. Let's put it back the way it was and learn how Windows Snap will make this far easier for us. By grabbing a title bar, we know this already, we can drag the window around, up, down, left, and right. But if we grab a title bar and we shove the title bar all the way to the right or all the way to the left side of our screen, as I'm doing now, you'll notice as soon as my mouse hits the right edge of the screen, it'll snap and fill the screen with that program. But notice the new feature, Microsoft, they do a lot of research. And they realize that when we do a Windows Snap, say to the right side of their screen, we're probably interested in snapping another program to the left. So it tiles the programs and says, hey, Tom, which of these windows would you like to snap to the left side of the screen? And I'd like to snap Excel. So I click and boom, both windows are sitting side by side. I'm going to show that to you again much quicker this time. So I'll drag Excel back down, drag Word back down, and my plan now is to snap Microsoft Word to the left side of the screen and Excel to the right. So I'll grab Excel this time and drag it to the right side of the screen. It'll snap, and then right away Microsoft says, well, do you want to snap one of these other windows? Yes. How about Word? Boom, there it is. And I can grab the top of my windows once again to drag them down out of the snapped mode. You might think, well, Tom, what if I don't want to snap a second window? If that's the case, you simply drag a window to the right, or this time, as I'm going to do, to the left. I'll snap it in. And if I don't want to snap Word or the File Explorer as well to the right, I just simply click in the blank area of my screen, and it leaves the windows right where they were. Windows Snap is a really great feature. It always has been, but now it's been enhanced with the auto tiling, allowing me to snap another window in place on the opposite side of the screen. Take a moment, pause the video, and go try Windows Snap yourself. As you can see, I've got a boatload of applications running on this desktop. Word, Excel, File Explorer, OneNote, a calculator. I'd like to get it all off my screen. I don't want to close the programs. I just like to minimize them all. Well, on the lower right corner of your screen, way down there, it looks like absolutely nothing. To the right of your clock, there's a special button down there called Show Desktop. You don't even see your mouse when you get down there, but when you shove your mouse all the way to the lower right corner of your screen and just click once, it'll minimize all your windows. Nothing's been closed, it's just simply minimized. If I click there again, all the icons come right back, all the windows come right back where they were. Now that's a great feature. In fact, there's a keyboard shortcut for that. If you hold down the Windows key and hit a D, D standing for desktop, it does the same thing. Windows D will bring everything right back where it was originally. So either use the lower right corner of your screen or Windows D to minimize everything or bring it right back to where it was before you minimized it. Give it a try. Pause the video, try Windows D, or use the lower right corner of your screen to show your desktop. Come back in just a minute and I'll show you one more cool Windows feature for managing all these windows on your screen. Well, I'm glad you came back because I wanted to show you one more really cool feature to deal with multiple windows on your desktop. It's called Windows Shake. Yep, you heard me right. Windows Shake. If I go to any one of these windows, perhaps Microsoft Excel, and grab it by the title bar, hold down my mouse button and give it a good shaking. All the other windows minimize except for Excel. It's like taking a piece of paper and shaking all the crumbs off it. They all fall down and land on the taskbar. If I take my mouse back to the icon, the title bar of Excel, and shake it again, everything comes right back where it was. Let's do it again to another window. How about the calculator? Give it a good shaking. Everything falls off. I shake it again. Everything comes right back where it was. Now it looks like I'm doing a spastic shake to get it to work, but really it's just a good swift 1, 2, 3. So you do a 1, 2, 3 and everything minimizes. 1, 2, 3 and everything comes back. But don't be shy. If you give it a 4 or 5 or 6 spastic shakes, it'll still work quite nicely. We call that Windows Shake. Pause the video, go give that one a try. It's actually kind of fun and very efficient. One of the great features of modern computers are their ability to search for content. Windows 10 is a shining example of content searches. Now, when we search for content, we're talking about virtually any content that we have access to on our computer, whether it be applications such as Word or Excel, documents that we've created, control panel settings, or even the internet or even your intranet. We are able to search for anything as mentioned down here on the taskbar, where Microsoft nicely asks us to go ahead and ask it anything. So I'm going to click down there and type in Microsoft Excel. Now, of course, when I type in Excel, the first thing it finds is Excel, the application. Very easy. Super easy to search for content. But let's take that one step further. I'm going to go into Microsoft Word and write a quick letter. The letter is going to read, "Dear friends, thanks for joining me for this series of videos about Windows 10. Now I'm going to do something that we've all done 1,000 times before. Save the document, but not pay attention to where I save it, and I'm not going to pay attention to the name I give it. I'm in a hurry. I've got a life to lead here. I've got things to do. So I'll click on the Save button. I'll give it a save somewhere on this PC. I'll go ahead and open up a folder. I'll double-click on a folder, and I'll give it a bad name. Now, when I mean bad name, it's an unthought-out, poorly named document. We've all done it before, and now an hour from now, a day from now, a week from now, when I need to find that document, 1, I can't remember what I called it, and 2, I don't remember where I've saved it. Can we relate? Of course. So let's go ahead and take Microsoft Windows 10 up on its offer to ask it anything. I'll click on the Ask Me Anything, and let's see. I don't remember what I called the document, but I know it had something to do with students. Or no, I think I used the word friends. I did use the word friends, and when I type in the word friends and click on My Stuff, it's going to show me everything with the word friends in it, and sure enough, there's the document I created just now with the bad name with the words Dear Friends in it. Sure enough, it's as easy as clicking on it and opening it up. And I found my content. So Microsoft Windows 10 is not only allowing you to search for your applications, but it also allows you to search for your documents. Even if you don't know the name of the document, all you need to do is search for something you know about the document, maybe some content, a keyword or a phrase that you used in the document. It goes a bit further than that. We can actually search the internet directly from the Ask Me Anything window on the bottom of our taskbar. Let's go ahead and try it again. This time I'm interested in searching for boats for sale in San Francisco. Now, when I hit the Enter key, it'll automatically search for boats for sale in San Francisco on the internet. So I can initiate an internet search straight away using my taskbar on the lower right corner of my screen. So we've learned in the last few moments that we can search for applications, we can search for documents, we can even search the internet using the taskbar lower left corner. One more thing I'd like to show you to search for. Perhaps we'd like to find how to change the system settings. Maybe my mouse is acting a little bit too quick and I'd like to slow down the scroll speed. So I'm going to type in the word mouse. When I type in the word mouse, sure enough, it brings up the change your mouse settings, which will open up the system control panel for my mouse and my touchpad, and I can slow down my scroll speed or speed it up. So the search box, once again, searches for everything. Pause your video, go give it a try. Test it out. Search for anything. This short video is going to introduce you to the File Explorer. Now the File Explorer, which is easily accessible via this icon right here, is quite familiar to us. It's where we go to access our files on our hard drive and other places we may have access to files, such as server drives or even the internet where we have files stored. We have access to our hard drive, such as our C drive and maybe our network drives. Perhaps we have an N drive or an S or a T drive. This is where we access those drives just like we've always done in the past. Very familiar interface. I'm going to introduce you to a couple new features of the File Explorer by first off starting a new document. I'll launch Microsoft Excel. We'll start a new basic document. How about a super spreadsheet? Now, of course, when I finish my spreadsheet or get to a point where I'd like to save it, I can go to the File menu and we can choose Save As most of us have. Scroll on down. We're going to put a place. How about somewhere, put in a place on this PC. Let's say I'll start with my desktop, and then we'll navigate down to a folder called Projects, and I'll store it in my Projects folder, and we'll call it, how about our super sheet. Now, once I close out of the program, I can then access that document whenever I like by going back to the Explorer. By the way, there's a keystroke for the Explorer view. Hold down the Windows key and hit an E. That'll bring up the Explorer view, E for Explorer. That's a great little shortcut. Let's do it again. Windows E will bring up the Explorer view. And now when I get to the Explorer view, I right away notice that I see my frequent folders. That's a new feature. And I also see straight away recent files. And if I scroll down a little bit, you can see the super sheet I just worked on is under my recent files, as expected. So automatically now, one of the new features of my Explorer view is my recent files are automatically kept up to date for me so I can find things that I've accessed recently. No doubt there are folders and network drives that you visit on a regular basis. Place where you store your documents, whether it be on your local hard drive or up on an S drive or a T drive. There's always a place that we go to over and over again. Windows 10 has enhanced the Explorer view to really help.
All processes and high-level view like a system. Allows us to divide the pixel space into containers and have each of those in separate modes if we want. Drag and drop. But if we go on to those display areas and getting the content out on the screens. We've got H.264 streaming of the sources back into Expose 2, which makes that very easy, and you can literally drag and drop the video onto the display areas and do the scaling and so on. Control is very simple. That's the next step. And we've got both a schedule mode, which you can see here, and a manual mode for taking and presenting to output all the video you've been working on. To learn more about Expose 2 and to learn more about our RGB Link video processors, please join us on the website www.rgblink.com. Thank you.
Of this antenna and an alternative antenna. For example, you could run one instance of WSJTX on your transmitting antenna and another instance of WSJTX on your favorite receiving antenna, and you can evaluate in real time what's going on between these two antennas, and you can tell whether your receiving antenna is doing anything at all. So I've mentioned this several times. We tend to talk about RDF for receiving antenna performance, but RDF has it's a theoretical measure, and it deals with the performance of an antenna relative to noise coming from the entire hemisphere. And the reality on the low bands is that typically the noise that perhaps comes from a thunderstorm is located in a tiny part of that hemisphere. So this device allows you to really optimize the performance of your receiving antennas. And my last slide, if you have the opportunity to place two good performing receiving antennas at least 500 feet apart, preferably 1,000 feet apart, and feed a pair of phase locked receivers, such as in the K3S, the diversity performance is quite remarkable and well worth the effort to do it. What I use in my station to achieve this is we receive on one of the receivers using my transmit 4-square array for receiving, of course, and the other input to the receiver is either one of the beverages or one of the WHJI 8-circle arrays. So here we are back on the coast of Ireland, and it's over to K1AR.
Okay. Hey, Frank, that was really, really great. Thank you for that. And I'm sure our 2,120 viewers also enjoyed it, for those of you keeping score. So we have quite a few questions, and let me try to weed through these with Scotty, N3RA, who's also helping out here. And the first one really deals with a specific question, but I think you can generalize it. And the question had to do with the impact of having something like a K9AY loop near a tower, but and how that impacts performance. But the broader question is really, what is the impact on any of these receiving antennas when you start to deal with environments where there's lots of trees or shrubs or towers or things in the way, and do you have any experience on the impact of performance?
Well, thank you for that question. It's a very important question, and it comes up a lot. I'll address the simpler question first, and that is shrubs and bushes. Their main impact is on high Z antennas. The high Z antennas are very high impedance at the feed point, and if you have a shrub or a tree immediately adjacent to that vertical, it's going to cause a problem. I've never used these antennas myself, so I can't share any personal experience in that regard. But the generally accepted rule is that you try to get the verticals installed at least 10 or 20 feet away from the nearest building. But the issue with buildings is they often have metal inside, which can be even worse, or tree or bush. But the much more difficult question is, what about things like towers, antennas, power lines, all of which create problems. The big problem with power lines is that they often have a vertical wire running up the pole to lightning arresters or transformers up at the top of the pole. So this is a big problem. And even if you don't have that, of course, power lines are often noise sources. So the best thing I can say is there's not much you can do about the power lines other than try to keep away from them. And in terms of your own antenna system, you can't do much about the towers, so try to keep away from it. But in the case of, let's say, a 160-meter vertical, or whatever your 160-meter antenna is, and of course, anyone on 160 is surely using a vertical and not a horizontal antenna. One way that you can minimize the interference between a transmitting vertical and a receiving antenna is to put a relay at the base of the 160-meter vertical and to open circuit the feed point to that vertical when you are receiving. So it's, and you key that relay exactly the way you key the amplifier in your station. So that's kind of a brute force way to eliminate the interference between a 160-meter vertical and the receiving antenna, but it's very, very easy to do. So that's the approach I always recommend. So back to you, John.
K1AR, are you muted?
Sorry about that. Scotty, do you have a question you'd like to ask?
Sure, very good. Thank you, Frank, for that fantastic presentation. Very interesting, and it makes me yearn to get outside and try something to improve the low bands for here. There's a couple of questions about things like, what are your recommendations for steep or rocky terrain? You know, that sort of thing where it's, you know, the where you're putting the antennas and, you know, how to slope impact what's going on and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. Very few of us have an ideal environment. For example, my environment is somewhat sloped, but not steep, so it's not as severe as this case. And you know what I always recommend to hams is, you know, very few of us are ever in an ideal situation. So we always have to make compromises. And the most important part of an antenna is to actually get on the air and use it and enjoy it. So my recommendation is just to do the best you can. W4DR, very accomplished 160-meter DXer, faced this situation when he installed his transmitting Foursquare many years ago. And if you look at the DXCC totals, his total on 160 is pretty darn good for a 160-meter DXCC. And what he did, which was a good idea, but not everyone could do this, is he oriented the Foursquare so that only one of the four elements was way down the slope compared to the other three, and he elevated that one. So that vertical is an elevated vertical, and used elevated radial so that the array is closer to horizontal than it otherwise would have been on the sloped array. So I guess my recommendation is not to worry about it. Do the best you can, and enjoy the fruits of your labors. John, is it your turn?
Yeah, that's great. We have a user who's logged in from India, and he's living in a condo environment, and he's asking a question of all the antennas he'd like to put up, maybe like the one you actually have implemented. He doesn't have that option. He needs to put something on a roof. What would you recommend?
Well, of course, thank you for that question. Lots of hams are on 160 meters in far less than ideal environments. So don't let that stop you. Do the best you can. On 160 meters, I always recommend a vertical if you can. Their performance exceeds horizontal antennas in just about every case. So you did mention how high above the ground the antenna would be, how tall the building is. But I would recommend a vertical if you can do that. As little as 30 or 40 feet, and the ideal way to do that is to make it as an inverted L, so it goes up at least 30 or 40 feet vertical, and then a horizontal wire from there to as far out towards the corner of that roof as you can. So that's what I recommend. A lot of the details depending on the unique situation on the roof of that building. So again, I would recommend do the best you can and enjoy the results of your work. And that's it.
Go ahead, Scotty.
All right. One of the other questions we have from somebody who's new to contesting, and they're wondering if a 150-foot bog may be a good first receive antenna for a newbie, and if so, what kind of other equipment relative to that would you suggest, since they're working on a budget and they're just new to the radio sport?
Yeah. Well, a bog is a good choice where stealth is an issue. So if that's what you're dealing with is stealth, then the bog is a good choice. But if you don't need stealth, you're going to get better performance out of a beverage that's higher, and usually your best choice is 7 feet, just so that it's not a hazard to people on that property. Now, short beverages on 160 meters, they can have good front to back ratio, but the beam width off the front is very, very broad. So my recommendation in a small space would not be to use either a bog or a beverage, because their performance is very limited in that small space. So my recommendation is that you go back and look at my presentation at some of the shorter antennas. The easiest one by far is a pair of verticals, only 25 feet high, fed into an NCC2 controller. If you don't want to make the expense of the NCC2 controller, you can phase those, and you can either find articles that describe how to do that, or you can send me an email and I can help you. So my recommendation would be to not use a bog at all unless stealth is an issue. Back to you, John.
Okay, that's great, Frank. So two questions that are kind of related, and the first one is, we tend to think of antennas in terms of and their performance. We tend to think more transmit antennas in terms of patterns and things like that. And the question is, does the same logic and science apply to receiving antennas when determining patterns? Second, kind of related to that, and maybe from your own personal experience, is how do you actually measure the reality of whether, other than on-air performance, whether or not you're actually getting interaction with the other things that are around your property that you're also using?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, transmit antennas and receiving antennas are different animals. We usually use the receiving antennas to get rid of interference that's coming from storms. If we're getting into a DX contest, for example, and there's a thunderstorm 500 miles away to the south, well, what we really care about is nulling out signals that are coming from the south. The other situation where receiving antennas really help is if you're in a big pile up in a DX contest or a DX expedition, and you want to hear that DX station, but you've got all these enormous signals coming from the US in that pile up, and the receiving antenna is really, really helpful in that situation too. So in the case of a receiving antenna, what we really care about is the ability to null out interference. That's what it's all about. For a transmit antenna, usually what we're interested in is very high efficiency and gain. We really don't care that much about pattern, but we care a lot about gain. And for receiving, we care a lot about interference. So they're kind of different animals. And from my own experience, what I use to evaluate the performance of antennas, quite honestly, is our performance in contests. But I do occasionally use two instances of WSJTX to compare, for example, the performance of my beverages and the 8-circle arrays. But I only do that maybe once a year when I have some spare time. So mostly what I care about is how well the things work in contests, and we just get into a bunch of those 160 contests, DX contests and both enjoy the experience as well as you really do get an opportunity to try your receiving antennas in a variety of situations, and then you get a pretty darn good view. I always ask at the end of a contest, I always ask the operators in the different bands how the receiving antennas worked, and I usually get the same answer, and that is, it depends on the situation. In some cases, the 8-circle was best. In some cases, the beverage was best. And in some cases, the transmit 4-square was best on receive. And it just depends on where that interference is coming from. So, Scott, is it your turn?
It is. We have a couple of questions here kind of related to trees and things of that nature. And you sort of went through this a little bit, but the questions keep coming up. So one of the questions is, what's the effect if my choices for mounting are to mount some of these antennas or a beverage inside of trees, physical in the woods, so to speak. And the second is if I'm using trees as a support, is it better? I'm using insulated wire for a beverage, and I'm stapling it to a tree. Am I better off?
Kak, tadi aku teleponan sama ibu. Katanya ibu nggak sahur.
Ramadan terasa berbeda.
Saat ku menyembahmu, rohmu bekerja. Saat ku memujimu, kau bertahta di atas pujian. Saat ku menyembahmu, rohmu bekerja. Saat ku memujimu, kau bertahta di atas pujian. Ku angkat hatiku, ku pandang kekudusanmu. Saat ku sembah, ku pujimu, ku rasakan kehadiran-Mu Tuhan. Saat ku menyembahmu, rohmu bekerja. Saat ku memujimu, kau bertahta di atas pujian. Ku angkat hatiku, ku pandang kekudusan-Mu. Saat ku sembah, ku pujimu, ku rasakan kehadiran-Mu Tuhan. Ku angkat hatiku, ku pandang kekudusan-Mu. Oh, saat ku sembah, ku pujimu, ku rasakan kehadiran-Mu Tuhan. Oh. bertatapan dengan wajahmu, memandang keindahanmu di tempat kudusmu, ku rasakan hadirmu. Kau hadir di sini. Oh, di ruang maha kudusmu, ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau, ku angkat hatiku, ku pandang keindahanmu saat ku menatapmu. Kau tersenyum, ku rasakan besarnya kasihmu. Ku datang padamu dengan segala kelemahanku, dan ku tersungkur, ku bersyukur kau selalu menerima diriku. Ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau, kau yang baik. Ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau di dalam roh dan kebenaran. Oh, ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau di dalam roh dan kebenaran. Ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau di dalam roh dan kebenaran. Kau layak disembah. Penuhiku saat kau hadir, ku rindu selalu diam di dalam baitmu. Oh, menikmati kasih anugerahmu. Kau ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau di dalam roh dan kebenaran. Ku sembah kau, ku sembah kau, oh ku sembah Yes. Hadiratmu, urapanmu memenuhiku, mengalirlah urapilah. Ku butuh hadiratmu di setiap waktu. Hadiratmu Tuhan, ku rasakan kekudusanmu Bapa, penuhiku, penuhiku, ku rindu selalu diam di dalam baitmu.